Strong protagonists are all the rage, being the ideal heroic character it entails. Movies often portray the main character as the ideal image of steroid-abusing heroism, with muscly biceps that would make a mountain cry. And that typical look also applies to main characters in other media, such as video games. Video games often showcase the hero as someone who can brute force their way through just about everything, allowing the player a sense of escapism. But adventure games were different. Rather than using brawn, those often involved utilising brains and trickery, so much so that it was a necessity to survive in the harsh worlds of Sierra games. I've already discussed the first games in the Space Quest, King's Quest and Gabriel Knight's Quest series, where each protagonist faces off against certain death. The harsh reality of the Sierra games were that unless you saved frequently, you were going to have an awful time, with the game over screen flashing and often the narrator haunting you. So imagine my surprise when I learned there was in fact a game that put you in the position of fighting back. That game being Quest for Glory, so you want to be a hero. Originally known in 1989 as Hero's Quest before getting hit by the trademark train and becoming the Quest for Glory series, the game was a mix between the typical Sierra adventure experience and a role-playing game, with the player creating their own character to adventure through the lands, plopping them into a land known as the Valley of Spielberg in search to become a hero. You know, hence the title. There are two different versions of the original game. The 1989 EGA version, which utilised parsers, and the VGA remake in 1992, which provided the typical point-and-click playstyle we have all came to love. For the purpose of this video, I played using the VGA version, because sue me, I'm not very good with parsers. Now, before starting the game, the player gets the option to select their class, choosing between Fighter, Mage or Thief, with each class having different solutions throughout the game. Rather than cover all three classes in one video, this video will cover the Fighter's path with my own character, the heroic and courageous Squiplar, and later videos will be released covering the gameplay of the other two classes. The game lets you choose the stats you allocate for your character, so of course we invest most of it in strength and weapons. Intelligence? No need for it. Squiplar has no need for the big brains when he has a large sword to cleave all enemies aside. Or at least I mean most enemies, I guess. Adventuring is hard, guys. Once created, our hero Squiplar finds himself in the town of Spielberg. The gameplay is pretty much standard Sierra adventure, allowing the player to interact with characters and ask about specific topics through dialogue, and we learn from the sheriff about some of the locations of the town. There are a few different locations in the game, such as the inn, where the player can rest after a hard day of beating up goblins, eating and drinking food, in what is quite literally a cat cafe. Make sure to check your food for hair. Ugh. Aside from this, there is a general goods store where the player can buy items such as food rations and some big brand spanking new armour once they are rich, and a sleazy tavern with some unsavoury characters. There is also a magic shop, although Squiplar had very little to do with this place and instead focused more on the famed Guildhall, which of course is our first stop on our quest to become a hero. Although quite frankly the place is pretty lacking, and there isn't exactly a ceremonial induction to it. In fact, to join the guild you just write your name down in the book, like leaving some kind of comment on someone's blog. But finally, we are adventurers. As a member of the guild, we have access to their bulletin board, which posts some quests for the player to pursue, with many acting as the main basis of the game's story, such as the capture or death of a brigand warlock and their leader, and the safe return of the Baron's children, Bernard and Elsa von Spielberg, who have both disappeared mysteriously, reportedly after a witch known as the Baba Yaga cast a curse on the Baron, and thus starts Squiplar's heroic quest for glory. TM. Now, while this is a Sierra adventure game and does have similar gameplay to other titles in the company, the key difference here is that the player does have the option to tackle foes head on, or at least that's the case for the fighter. Combat is a large part for Quest of Glory, with many fiends roaming around in the surrounding forest. Feeling overeager, I stepped into a fight with a bandit. I'm going to be completely honest at this point, and state that even after finishing Quest for Glory, I still haven't got a clue on how the combat works. There are 5 buttons for the player to select, with the top left being a swing, the top right being a stab, the bottom left being what I believe to be a block, and the bottom right being a dodge, with the centre button being the option to run away from the fight. Throughout the entire game, I found myself only using the top buttons to attack. Regardless of when I tried to block, I found myself taking damage. So I found myself just outright spamming the attack buttons to win, and often that strategy worked. Yes, I'm what you might call a pro gamer. But this didn't always work, especially at the beginning of the game. Occasionally, some enemies will block your attacks, so the game indicates that timing is everything. Although at times I feel I am attacking at the right moment, but still missing. But really, it isn't enough to just keep spamming attacks and hoping for the best. Alongside the health bar, there is a stamina bar just below, showing how much energy the hero has left. As it gets lower, the player's attack becomes less effective until it's pretty much the equivalent of slapping someone with a wet noodle. And if the player continues to recklessly spend all their stamina, they will die from exhaustion. Which is exactly what happened during this fight with the bandit. Let's take a look at it in full, shall we? Beautiful. As a result, the player needs to keep both their health and their stamina up. In order to do this, they can look to rest, eat food, or stay a night at the town's inn. The player can also look to sleep for a night, but it's ill-advised to attempt to do this out in the wilds, where anyone can sneak up on you and give you a game over. However, there are a few little sanctuary areas, such as sleeping at the inn in Spielberg, or at this lovely little Bob Ross painting over here, where the player can rest freely and also eat the fruit. As well as this, the hero can also visit the nearby healer, who creates potions for them, allowing them to replenish any stamina and health, as well as other potions that take their fancy. In order to keep moving, the player needs to keep fighting enemies who drop gold, as well as provide experience. However, unlike other RPGs which feature levels, Quest for Glory 1 instead has a system that allocates increases in skills based on what the player has done. In this case, after wiping out a battalion of goblins, Squiplar's strength and stamina began to increase more and more to the point that later down the line, he could easily fell an ogre. Of course, being a Sierra point-and-click adventure game, Squiplar isn't exactly spared from the same fate as other Sierra protagonists. Instant death. There are moments where one wrong move can cost the player dearly, such as making the poor decision to purchase the most expensive drink in the tavern, the Dragon's Breath, which literally incinerates poor Squiplar, or when I accidentally got too close to a walking house and it dropped down on poor Squiplar's teeny tiny head. Naturally, this means that the most important rule is to save, and then save again, utilising different saves in the event of a dead man walking scenario, or a dead end as often known. I'm generally not too sure on how many true dead ends there are in Quest for Glory. There was a moment where Squiplar was asked by a dryad to seek out a seed, which he later found being spat around by some plants. Figuring out I was a strong brute force character, I showed no remorse in killing the plant to retrieve the seed, only for the dryad to react strongly and turn poor thunder-headed Squiplar into a plant himself. Whoops. I don't know if this is a dead end, or if there exists other ways to maneuver past this, but it seemed important, as the reward for this would later be needed in the endgame. The main story of the game follows Squiplar's adventures, noted from the bulletin board in the Guildhall. As such, I'll be splitting the video between the heroic quest of Squiplar starting from his humble beginnings. The first quest is something that should be absolutely simple enough, and that's finding the nearby healer's ring. Using my keen senses, I realised that something was flashing up there on the tree, and that was likely the ring. But much like Squiplar's lacking intelligence, my brain struggled to figure out how to reach it. Poor Squiplar's climbing skills were something to be desired, and I didn't particularly get the option to shake the tree. Instead, the answer lies at your feet, picking up rocks from the ground and flinging them at the nest. I wasn't even aware this was a thing.
Graham, watch out! A poisonous snake!
So, with the easiest quest in the game, I had to look up a guide. This does not bode well for the rest of the game, but bear with me. Speaking of guides, when I started, I was determined to start mapping out the area, having gotten lost in the forest several times, and having no idea where to go. But eventually, I gave up and instead referred to this guide here.
If you want to know how far I got in the mapping process, then I've got it right here. Beautiful, isn't it?
The first few quests that Squiplar engages in are simple enough, finding the healer's ring and being asked to gather some ingredients for her, although these are purely optional and therefore I gave the ingredient quest a miss, seeing how I couldn't get any of the stuff to drop. The next quest Squiplar pursues is the hunt for the Baron's son, Bernard, who disappeared many years prior. Rescuing lovely Bernard was actually a complete accident on my part. In wanting to test out my powers against a strong foe, I ran to fight a nearby ogre, and once it was felled, I explored its cave, where a bear was being kept prisoner. After killing a residing kobold, I used the key it was holding on the chain for the bear against my better judgment, thinking I'd get a pretty rad friendly bear on my team. But instead it transformed back into this arsehole. After completing the quest, the Baron praises Squiplar and invites him to a feast and to stay the night, completing his quest. But not fully, because clearly he has a favourite child, and the game continues until Squiplar rescues her. The second quest that Squiplar pursued was in fact the main quest of the game, to find the missing daughter of the Baron, and to find and defeat the leader of the brigands and their warlock, all of which being pretty closely related together. While visiting the tavern, Squiplar happens upon a note indicating a meeting nearby. While skulking nearby, he sneaks nearby a meeting between two brigands, Brutus and Bruno, who discuss the arrival of the hero, while also talking about the password to get into the brigand stronghold and about the key needed to open the secret entrance, meaning that Squiplar needed to get his filthy paws on that key. But of course that was easier said than done. When I mentioned the instant game overs that appear, one of the most prominent examples was this goddamn part, trying to reach Brutus to kill him and take his key. If walking through the forest, the player may stumble across Bruno, who shows absolutely no hesitation to off the hero by throwing poison daggers at him. As a result, we don't talk about Bruno. No. Attempts to skirt around him weren't easy, and in some cases, I accidentally stumbled into the side areas of the archery range where Brutus also happens to immediately kill Squiplar with poison throwing daggers. Et tu, Brutus? Eventually we snagged the key and managed to unlock the secret entrance to the brigand stronghold, facing off against a nearby troll. As it turns out, this was apparently not necessary in the slightest, since it seems that you can get past this troll without fainting by saying the password. But not Squiplar. Squiplar is out for the blood of unholy abominations. And also, I didn't really think about that. After this, Squiplar faces off against a Minotaur, who protects the entrance to the brigand stronghold before entering into the stronghold itself, which sees even more game overs for the player to die to, such as tripwires, fake bridges, and simply walking into open chasms in one of the most intense moments of the game. After pursuing through here, the hero finds himself being chased by brigands and needs to block off the exits, and then climb onto the table and swing across to take out the Three Stooges before running into whatever room this is. It's here that Squiplar meets with the brigand's warlock, who happens to be the Baron's old jester, Yorick, who is without a doubt the most annoying character I've ever seen. After withstanding several books thrown at his puny fighter brain and traversing the bizarre maze, Squiplar finds himself face to face with the brigand leader, the missing daughter, Elsa von Spielberg, who was kidnapped and cursed to lose her memory, and thus raised by the brigands, becoming their leader. At this point, I had no idea what to do, and she proceeded to jump over the table and butcher Squiplar. Ouch. As it turns out, this appears to be another dead end that I accidentally stumbled across. In order to cure Elsa, the hero needs to craft a dispel potion, meaning that I had to backtrack a few dozen saves to seek out the cure. And as it turns out, helping the Dryad find a seed by non-violent means provides him with the recipe for the cure and one of the ingredients, a magical acorn. Squiplar's quest then turns into a gathering quest as he seeks out the other ingredients: water from a nearby waterfall, some green fur from some of the creatures nearby, some flowers from the safe sanctuary, and some fairy dust from some pretty dance-fevered fairies at night. Once done, the hero takes us to the potion maker, who creates the potion and thus allows us to go through all of that all over again, except this time we get to scoosh the potion in the woman's face, curing her of her amnesia and bringing her back to her old self, where she decides to return back home. Except I don't think she realises she's literally criminal. Before anyone tries to correct me and say that she still maintained a moral compass as a criminal, she still stole, and she killed Squiplar. After this, the player can return back to the Baron's castle, where the game ends, with the top left turning to, so you've become a hero. At first I thought the game had crashed since nothing had happened, so I decided I should reload my save and accomplish one final task: ridding the lands of the evil ogress enchantress, Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga resides in a rather evil-looking residential area, living in some sort of walking hut. Once the player gains access, she immediately turns them into a frog and threatens to make them into food. However, she then decides the hero may be of some use to them, giving them the task to seek out a mandrake from a nearby graveyard and to bring it back to her by day's break, or he will die. The catch is that the mandrake must be harvested at midnight exactly, otherwise the mandrake will disappear. If wandering the forest at night and risking getting your eyes scratched out by cheetahs wasn't bad enough, then wandering into graveyards at night will send you screaming, as entering without protection will result in the hero's untimely death. Instead, the player needs to purchase an undead unguent, I don't know what that means, that repels the spooky scary skeleton and ghosts, allowing him to receive the mandrake root and save his life. However, I do believe this part is completely optional and probably only serves to give more points. Throughout his journey, Squiplar hears frequent mention of a magic mirror that helps deflect spells back at casters, and it just so happens the brigand leader herself holds the magical mirror. Once cured, Squiplar takes the magic mirror and ventures back to Baba Yaga's hut, where he uses the mirror to reflect the frog spell back at the ogress, defeating her and sending her fleeing away, and ending the game. Once again, the game ends in the throne room of the Baron, although I came to realise that the game hadn't glitched, and instead I just wasn't patient enough to wait until the ceremony began, with the Baron declaring Squiplar as a hero, and before Squiplar ventures off on a magic carpet to a new land, ending the game. However, Squiplar's adventures have only just begun, as the Quest for Glory games actually act as a large saga for the player's character, allowing the hero to be imported into future games. At the end of Quest for Glory 1, an option appears indicating that the player can save their character, allowing them to transfer their character with their stats over into a new game, along with certain items such as their armour and money. So you can absolutely guarantee there will be other videos down the line, continuing the legacy and legendary exploits of the heroic Squiplar. Want to make sure you don't miss out on the latest Squiplar adventure, or want to see later videos detailing the mage or thief paths of Quest for Glory 1? Then make sure you don't forget to subscribe to Noir Reservoir and click that little bell down there to be kept up to date on all future Noir Reservoir videos. And if you want to help support the channel, please consider liking the video and sharing it with any adventure game aficionados you think will appreciate it. And finally, why not consider following my Twitter for the dank memes? I'm sure you won't regret it. Probably. So until next time my friends, I'll catch you later.